Chapter 388. When the bright light disappeared, the rumblings stopped. Ibufan looked at the place where Immorse had been standing. Although he knew that this kid would be blasted to pieces by the micro-wormhole explosive bomb, he couldn't see anything. But after the explosion, people would always subconsciously look at the explosion point. However, with that one glance, he was like the 7 fairies who had been immobilized. He stood there in a daze. Other than the shock and fear in his eyes, he couldn't move at all. When the rest of the Heavenly Gold Sect disciples saw the explosion point, they were also immobilized just like Ibufan. He saw that the kid was standing there, untouched at the explosion point. There was no difference from before the explosion. Even his posture didn't change. They were still some distance away from the explosion point, and they had even condensed an energy shield. After the explosion, the clothes on their backs were torn apart by the powerful energy. This kid was at the explosion point, but not only was he not injured, even his clothes were not damaged at all. It had to be known that even if it was a grand desolate master, after enduring such a violent explosion, it was impossible for his clothes to remain undamaged. This was completely beyond the scope of their understanding. Just as they were in shock, Immorse took a step forward. His figure disappeared. Everyone was shocked again. When Immorse appeared again, he was already in front of Ibufan. Seeing this, Ibufan condensed an energy shield again and shouted in horror, "No, you can't kill me, I'm a heavenly gold." Bang! Before he could finish, his head was smashed into the ground by Immorse. Seeing this, the rest of the people turned pale. In their eyes, Ibufan had always been high and mighty. They had to be careful when they spoke in front of Ibufan. But now Ibufan's head was directly smashed into the ground by this guy. The surrounding soil was stained with blood from the explosion of the head. At the same time, a system notification sounded in Immorse's mind. Frowny face killed a level 10 scavenger with bare hands. Obtained 10 drops of Titan dragon blood. Seeing how brutal this guy was, the rest of the people didn't dare to stay any longer. They could only turn around and escape. However, in front of Immorse, could they escape? Immorse kept teleporting. Every time he teleported, a guy's head would explode. And in his mind there would be a notification. Speaking of which, killing these fellows was even easier than killing level 10 evolved blood breeds. After all, human level 10 hunters were much weaker than level 10 evolved vampires. In less than 15 seconds, Immorse had killed all the Heavenly Gold Sect disciples. Furthermore, all of them were insta-killed with bare hands. Could be seen how strong his combat strength was now. After killing all the disciples of the Heavenly Gold Sect, Immorse wanted to get some good stuff from them. However, to his disappointment, these people did not have anything good on them other than an explosive bomb. However, the explosive bullets had already been used. Sigh, what bad luck. Immorse sighed and shook his head. Actually, it wasn't that these people didn't have anything good on them. It was just that Immorse's standards were now much higher, and ordinary good things could not catch his eye. He used a fire to burn these people's corpses. Immorse continued to kill the blood breeds as if nothing had happened. Gradually, as time passed, Immorse had killed almost all the blood breeds within a 1,000-kilometer radius. At the same time in Tianlin City, the city lord was standing on the city wall. He held a giant sword in his hand and was wearing armor. On the city wall beside him, there were more than 100,000 soldiers. They were all staring into the darkness in the distance. Everyone's nerves were tense. Every time night fell, there would be evolved blood breeds trying to invade the human city. They could only barely defend Tianlin City by relying on the terrain advantage and many powerful weapons. However, this time was very strange. When night fell, not a single blood breed could be seen. More than 10 hours ago, he had already sent people out to scout. However, there was no reply until now. This gave him a bad premonition. Not only him but everyone else was frowning. The expected situation did not happen. Instead, it was this strange situation that made them feel uneasy. Could this be the legendary calm before the storm? Another half an hour later, several figures finally appeared in the distance. Everyone's heart tightened. However, they soon realized that these figures were not blood breeds, but spies they had sent out. The soldiers quickly welcomed the spies in. How is it? What's the situation? Where did those blood breeds go? The city lord saw that the spies were panting and sweating profusely. He ordered, "Bring water." Immediately, someone brought over a few cups of water. The city lord personally handed them to the spies. The spies did not stand on ceremony. They took the cups and gulped down the water. Only then did they speak. No, no blood breeds. There was not a single blood breed within a 100-kilometer radius. There were only blood breed corpses. Tens of thousands of blood breed corpses. All the blood breeds have been killed. Hearing this, all the soldiers looked at the spies in disbelief. All the spies nodded their heads in agreement. Yes, after we went out, we only saw piles and piles of blood breed corpses. All the blood breeds were killed in one hit. It seems that some powerful creature killed all the blood breeds. We were still worried, so we walked hundreds of kilometers away. However, we didn't see a single blood breed within hundreds of kilometers. Hearing this, the soldiers were both surprised and delighted. In the past, every night when the blood breeds attacked, they would suffer heavy losses. But this time, some kind of powerful creature had appeared and killed all of the blood breeds. Then they could avoid death and injury on this night. This was the first time in hundreds of years. However, among these people, there was one person who did not have a trace of joy on his face. That person was the city lord. When he heard that all the blood breeds had been killed, his heart skipped a beat. Oh no, was the werewolves going to appear? In legends, the werewolves and the blood breeds were sworn enemies. However, the werewolves rarely appeared. They only appeared once every 100 years. Every time the werewolves appeared, they would start a racial war with the blood breeds. Humans often became the cannon fodder between these two powerful races. As long as the werewolves and the blood breeds started a large-scale war, the ones who would be injured in the end would definitely be humans. In history, there were several wars between the werewolves and the blood breeds that almost wiped out humans. Chapter 389. There had always been such a legend on the Blood Wolf planet. When there were too many vampires, the werewolves would appear and start a war with the vampires. However, in every war, the ones who suffered the most were the humans. Humans did not have the strong vitality of the vampires. As long as the vampires did not kill them on the spot, they could not kill them. The werewolves were even stronger. Even if they were hit in the head, they could not be killed. The only way to kill them was to find a way to freeze them and reduce their cell activity to the minimum. Then they would shatter them. However, humans had limited abilities. How difficult was it to freeze them? Therefore, humans could only watch as the werewolves and vampires wreaked havoc on the land. There was nothing they could do. Thinking of this, the mayor looked up at the sky. He saw that the golden moon in the sky had dimmed a lot. On the contrary, the blood-red moon was even redder than before. It was frighteningly red. He looked at these warriors and hesitated. Should he tell these warriors? If he did not tell them, it would not make sense. If there was an emergency, they would not be so well prepared. But even if he told them, it would be of no use at all. In front of the powerful werewolves, humans were so weak and could not withstand a single blow. Even if they knew, it would be useless except for more fear. However, after hesitating for 5 minutes, he made up his mind. He gestured for the warriors to quiet down and then pointed at the blood-red moon in the sky that looked like a huge blood-red eye. He said, "The vampires killed this time are most likely werewolves." Everyone was stunned when they heard the word werewolves. Then everyone felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts. Their fear of werewolves was deeply rooted in their hearts. Thousands of years ago, their ancestors knew that every time werewolves appeared, it would be a huge disaster for humans. In the first half of their lives, many people had experienced such a disaster once. Although 100 years had passed, the destruction and damage caused by the appearance of the werewolves were still fresh in their minds. The thousands of warriors at the scene were all gloomy. After a moment, the mayor spoke again. "Prepare early." Hearing this, everyone went to prepare silently. Their so-called preparation was not to go back and say goodbye to their families. In front of the powerful werewolves, there was basically no need for them to defend the city. They couldn't defend it even if they tried. They could only pray that they survived. Meanwhile, in the wilderness, Immorse continued to hunt down these evolved vampires. He could clearly feel that there were more and more vampires around him. Furthermore, these vampires were no longer as afraid of death as they were in the past. Obviously, there must be some reason behind this that he did not know. However, Immorse didn't want to delve into it. His most important task now was to obtain enough dragon blood to become a desolate hunter. As for everything else, they were all secondary. In the worst-case scenario, even if he really encountered an unsolvable danger, he could still use teleportation to quickly escape. However, he also keenly noticed something. The blood moon in the sky was getting redder. It was so red that it was as if the moon was made entirely out of blood. In order to avoid any accidents, his dragon will was constantly paying attention to all the movements around him. Another 2 hours later, a long and desolate voice suddenly rang out. Oh, it sounded like a wolf's howl. Immerse's heart skipped a beat. He now knew that many legends were actually true. It was just that through word of mouth, these legends had been exaggerated artistically. Therefore, every time he went to a place, he would first understand the legends of the place. He knew that there were legends of werewolves in this world. Not only were there legends, but there were also records of real events from 100 years ago. It seemed that werewolves were about to appear again. According to the previous records, werewolves were stronger than evolved vampires. Although this world's settings only allowed the strongest evolved vampires to reach level 10, which was equivalent to a level 10 desolate hunter. However, among the werewolves, there were many who had reached the peak of level 10 and were only a hair away from breaking through. Their leader, the alpha werewolf, had already broken through to a level 1 mutant werewolf. According to the records, a level 1 mutant werewolf's combat power was stronger than a level 3 desolate hunter. However, this was not the most frightening thing. The most frightening thing was encountering a war between werewolves and vampires. The war between werewolves and vampires would involve hundreds of thousands or even millions of vampires and werewolves. Therefore, even a desolate hunter could only take a detour when encountering a war between werewolves and vampires. After all, no matter how strong a desolate hunter was, it was impossible for him to fight against hundreds of thousands or millions of werewolves or vampires. Therefore, there were many warnings on the internet. If encountering a war of the blood wolf, the safest thing to do was to return to the flaming origin continent. This was because during the war of the blood wolf, the entire blood wolf planet was a war zone. Even if one hid in a human city, it was not safe at all. However, Immerse did not care about this. With his many tricks, even if he could not do anything in such a battle, at least escaping would not be a problem. Therefore, he quickly retracted his gaze from the blood moon in the sky and continued to kill the vampires. At this moment, another roar was heard. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It sounded like the sound of a bat. However, Immerse knew that this was the leader of the vampires, who was summoning all the vampires to prepare for battle. However, Immerse used the dragon psychic barrier to block all the vampires within the range of his dragon psychic barrier. These vampires frantically pounded on the dragon psychic barrier, but it was useless. Immerse continued to teleport and kill these vampires. After another hour, the werewolves had finished gathering. Immerse could not see the center of the werewolves within the range of his detection. He could only see the periphery of the werewolves. At present, these werewolves looked no different from normal people. There were males and females, old and young. However, when Immerse used the blood dragon's eye to check their levels, he found that these werewolves, regardless of gender or age, were all at level 10. None of them were below level 10. On the other side, the vampires had also gathered in an abandoned city. There were many more vampires than werewolves. In Immerse's detection, there were so many of them that he could not see the end of them. However, the individual strength of the vampires was much weaker than the werewolves. Apart from most of the level 10 vampires, there were also some below level 10. Chapter 390. In Immerse's investigation, hundreds of thousands of vampires had already started to gather. At the same time, tens of thousands of werewolves had also started to gather. And judging from the current situation, it was obvious that this was just the beginning. More vampires and werewolves were gathering. One could imagine that in the future, there would be tens or even millions of vampires and tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of werewolves. If other hunters saw this, their scalps would definitely go numb and their hearts would tremble. However, Immerse was secretly delighted in his heart. All the vampires and werewolves had gathered together, saving him the trouble of searching everywhere. One had to know that in his eyes, these were not vampires or werewolves at all, but the blood of the Titan dragon. Next, Immerse only paid a little attention to not expose himself too much. He specifically targeted the small vampires who were rushing toward the gathering point. In half an hour he had hunted hundreds to thousands of vampires. Of course, it was a little boring to always hunt vampires like this. Since there were werewolves now, he would try to hunt them down. In the coverage of the dragon's will, he detected about 5 werewolves rushing toward the gathering point. Immorse teleported and arrived among the 5 werewolves. Originally, he wanted to punch the werewolf at the back as soon as he appeared. However, just as he was about to attack, he suddenly felt an enormous wave of telekinesis pressing down on him. This wave of telekinesis was not the telekinesis of an ordinary telekinesis master. It was even more powerful than a level 10 telekinesis master. When it pressed down on Immorse's body, Immorse actually felt a pressure that he had never felt before. He tried to use his dragon's will to counterattack. In the end, his dragon's will could only spread to a range of 1 meter around him. He could not counterattack the powerful telekinesis at all. Immorse thought to himself that this was not good. He hurriedly teleported 100 kilometers away. Then he used the blood dragon's eye to investigate the 5 werewolves. 4 of them were normal level 10 werewolves. However, the last one shocked Immorse. This werewolf from the outside looked like a little lowly. If she were to put on the princess dress from the video, she would look exactly like a little princess. However, when Immorse used the blood dragon's eye to look at her, he discovered something different. Race: werewolf level. Level 10 werewolf, level 1 psychic talent skill. Mind control, good housework. Apart from being a werewolf equivalent to a level 10 scavenger, this little lowly was also a spiritual reader. What is a spiritual reader? Above level 10 psychic master was the spiritual psychic master. In addition to being able to use telekinesis to control objects like a psychic grandmaster, a psychic could also use telekinesis to influence a person's mind. He could even directly control the consciousness of others. Furthermore, after becoming a spiritual reader, one could awaken a variety of talents. This girl used mind control the moment she awakened. She was indeed a little perverted. Just as Immorse was thinking about this, the girl's telekinesis spread out. Moreover, it was so powerful that it directly pressed down on Immorse as if Mount Tai was pressing down on him. Immorse frowned slightly. He used dragon will to protect himself and quickly teleported away. Facing a spiritual reader with mind control skills like this was really troublesome. Immorse teleported more than 100 kilometers away. At this moment, he seemed to have exceeded the range of the little lowly's spiritual sense. Her spiritual sense didn't chase after Immorse anymore. At this moment, Immorse already had an idea in his heart. It might be difficult for others to deal with such a powerful creature. But for him it wasn't difficult. According to the direction that the 5 werewolves were heading, Immorse teleported a few times in a row and teleported to the path that they had to pass through. After waiting for about 5 minutes, he saw that the 5 werewolves had already rushed over. Immorse was lying on an open space by the forest. He activated camouflage. His entire body looked like it was slowly turning into a piece of withered wood. Then he took out the wormhole sniper rifle that he had signed in. What surprised him was that the moment he took out the sniper rifle, his camouflage skill actually changed the appearance of the sniper rifle. The skills given by the system were indeed abnormal. The little Lolita werewolf pouted and ran over while scolding, "You're so stupid. That guy ran away so fast. Otherwise he would be dead today." The other werewolves also revealed looks of disgust. "He actually tried to sneak attack us. I smelled the disgusting stench on their bodies as soon as they appeared. Yeah, humans who overestimate themselves." Immorse stealthily aimed the scope at the little lowly. The moment the scope caught the little lowly, the sniper rifle automatically recognized her face and marked her as the target. However, Immorse didn't immediately pull the trigger. This place was too far away. And he didn't know much about spiritual readers. Who knew if the spiritual reader master would be able to react at such a distance? Therefore, to be on the safe side, it was better to wait for them to get closer before making a move. Another 2 minutes later, the 5 werewolves were only 100 meters away from Immorse. Under such circumstances, they should have been able to sense the danger nearby. This was the combat intuition they had developed after a long period of battle. However, Immorse's camouflage skill was abnormal here. It wouldn't be detected by any spiritual detection. When the lowly was closer, Immorse took a deep breath. His right index finger suddenly exerted force. Bang! A loud sound was heard. A high explosive bullet instantly shot out from the muzzle of the gun. In the next moment, it disappeared from Immorse's sight. The little loli finally felt the danger. She hurriedly used her psychic power to investigate her surroundings. However, at this moment, a high-explosive bullet had already hit her head. Although her spiritual sense was strong, her body was only the body of an ordinary werewolf. How could she withstand the attack of this high-explosive bullet? Boom, flames and blood splattered in all directions. Not to mention the little loli's head, even the upper half of her body exploded into a bloody mist. The faces of the 4 werewolves around her were all splashed with blood. The 4 werewolves were all shocked and let out wolf howls. Howl, howl, howl. At the same time, they all instantly prostrated themselves on the ground. Their limbs turned into the limbs of wolves. Their mouths quickly became long. Their teeth turned into sharp fangs. A long wolf tail grew behind them. Thick hair grew all over their bodies. Not only did their appearance change but also their size. When they transformed into wolves, their bodies also rapidly increased in size. Each wolf was more than 10 meters long. They were all about 2 meters tall. When Immorse saw this, he understood. No wonder those vampires weren't a match for the werewolves. Just this size alone crushed the vampires. Moreover, there were spiritual readers among the werewolves. Chapter 391. The 4 wolves, each more than 10 meters long, rushed towards Immorse at the same time. Immorse could feel that the aura of these 4 10-meter-long giant wolves was far beyond that of a level 10 blood breed. If a level 10 hunter were to face such a level 10 werewolf, he would definitely be tortured to death. But Immorse didn't give them any chance at all. With a thought, a knife appeared in his hand. This saber was blood red in color. It was so red that it looked like blood could drip out. From the head to the hilt, it had a small S-shaped streamlined shape. The tip of the knife was extremely sharp. There was an S-shaped hollow line on the body of the knife, sticking to the blade and extending from the tip to the guard of the knife. On the back of the knife there were more than 10 saw teeth. Overall, it looked very scientific and mysterious. This was the mysterious ice magic slayer that Immorse hadn't used for a long time. The werewolf's vitality was extremely strong. Even if Immorse just shot the little loli in the head and the upper half of her body was still recovering quickly. And to kill the werewolf, he needed the cooperation of the ice attribute. The only thing that Immorse was a little worried was that he had used the mysterious ice magic slayer several times on Earth. At that time he was only dealing with small mutated zombies. And now he was dealing with werewolves that were several levels higher than mutated zombies. He didn't know if the mysterious ice magic slayer would be useful. And the giant wolf was 10 meters long, while the mysterious ice magic slayer was only a little more than a meter. In front of the giant wolf it was like a small knife. It was really a little inconspicuous. When the werewolves rushed over, Immorse teleported and was already behind a giant wolf. The mysterious ice magic slayer aimed at the back of its waist and chopped down. Wolves had copper heads, iron brains and tofu waists. So when an experienced hunter encountered a wolf, he would attack the wolf's waist. Crack. The moment the mysterious ice magic slayer met the giant wolf, it easily cut into its waist. And a long bloody wound appeared on its waist. However, before the blood could flow out, the giant wolf's wound quickly froze. And the speed of the freezing was extremely fast. Almost in an instant the entire wolf's body was frozen. Moreover, that was not all. The layer of ice followed the giant wolf's limbs and spread to the ground. Then everything within a 100-meter radius was instantly frozen. The ground, grass, trees, rivers and stones within 100 meters were all frozen. The remaining 3 wolves were about to continue pouncing towards Immorse when they were suddenly frozen into ice sculptures. Even the little loli who was recovering was frozen into an ice sculpture and stopped recovering. Within a radius of 100 meters, there was a layer of cold air. In the sky he planned to fly past this area. However, as soon as it passed through the air, it was instantly frozen. It fell from the sky and crashed onto the ice. With a crashing sound, it shattered into blood-red ice cubes. Immorse used his dragon's will to lightly shake it. Crush. The 4 giant wolves and the little loli's ice sculptures all shattered into pieces of blood-red ice on the ground. The giant wolf that was cut by the mysterious ice devil slaying saber was still emitting an unpleasant smell after being shattered into ice. It was obvious that the mystic ice devil slaying blade had released a corrosive liquid when it had struck it. It corroded the inside and froze the outside. Immorse stood at the center of the ice layer. Looking at the surrounding scene, he was secretly shocked. The mysterious ice devil slaying blade's strength was actually so strong? Back then, the mysterious ice devil slaying blade had a growth attribute and absorbed 100 evolution points every day to grow. Immorse did not care about this. It only absorbed 100 evolution points every day. How could it grow? Moreover, only a year had passed. Even if it grew, how much could it grow? However, he did not expect that it had grown to the point where it could kill a level 10 werewolf in just a year. Moreover, it could instantly kill many werewolves with a single attack. As expected, the system's products were all extraordinary. It was also at this moment that a system notification sounded in Immorse's mind. Frowny face killed a spiritual reader. Hidden mechanism triggered. Every time you kill a level 1 spiritual reader, you will obtain a strand of dragon's will. At the same time, a number appeared in Immorse's mind. Dragon's will, 11,000. Immorse was suddenly delighted. From the memories of the werewolves just now, he knew that there were tens of thousands of spiritual readers among the werewolves. It seemed that the improvement of his dragon's will was just around the corner. Next, Immorse killed a few more waves of werewolves in a row. These werewolf groups had 5 or 6 small ones and 30 or 50 large ones. What they all had in common was that there was a spiritual reader in each werewolf group. However, no matter if there were 5 or 6 of them or 30 or 50 of them, Immorse basically used the same method to kill them. First, he concealed himself and ambushed in front of them. When they were close, he used the wormhole sniper rifle to shoot at the spiritual reader among them. While waiting for their spiritual reader master to recover, Immorse quickly attacked. The mysterious ice devil slaying blade directly froze 100 meters. This series of actions could basically kill any werewolf group in an instant. After killing a few waves, Immorse looked at the number in his mind. Frowny face dragon's will. 111,000. Originally, Immorse had planned to raise his cultivation base to that of a desolate hunter. However, a spiritual reader had appeared now. They posed a great threat to him. Even if he became a level 1 desolate hunter, he still wouldn't have any advantage against these level 1 spiritual readers. Therefore, he decided to raise his dragon's will to level 6 first. In the next few hours, he kept hunting these werewolf spiritual readers. The number in his mind also kept increasing. Dragon's will, 831,000. However, he was very careful and only hunted small werewolf groups. When the battle between the werewolves and the blood breeds really started, it would be time for him to hunt these werewolves on a large scale. Another 5 hours later. The blood moon in the sky was even redder. It was as if there was a giant demon's blood-red eyes staring at the entire earth in the middle of the night. It was also at this moment that the werewolves and the blood breeds moved almost at the same time. In a huge abandoned city. This was the gathering place of the blood breeds. More than 1 million blood breeds flapped their blood-red demon wings and flew north. 1 million blood breeds covered the sky and the sun. Even half of the huge blood moon in the sky was covered by it. In a forest in the north, more than 100,000 werewolves had also gathered. They had all transformed into giant wolves that were more than 10 meters long. Under the lead of the alpha wolf, they ran towards the south. Behind them, the smoke and dust that rose up also turned blood red under the reflection of the blood moon. More than 2 hours later, the two sides gathered beside a large river. When Immorse saw this situation, his heart seemed to be burning with hot blood. How could a war between millions of creatures not make one's blood boil? Most importantly, if the two sides fought, it would be chaos. He could fish in troubled waters. Chapter 392. Immorse was waiting for the war between the werewolves and the blood breeds. At the same time, Tianlin City was filled with grief and fear. The natives knew that they would definitely suffer in the war between the werewolves and the blood breeds. This was the experience that they had gained over thousands of years. In these thousands of years, they had tried all kinds of methods. They had tried to please the blood breeds and the werewolves, fought against the blood breeds and the werewolves, and even dug underground shelters. But no matter what method they came up with, no matter if the werewolves or the blood breeds won, in the end it was always the humans who suffered. But this time the situation was different. Because there were still gods in the city. Of course, they also knew that they were not real gods. But those people were extremely powerful, far more powerful than the natives. So if they had any hope of escaping this time, it all depended on these people. Thinking of this, The city lord led hundreds of higher-ups of the city, representing more than 100,000 people in the city, to the residence of the gods. At this time those people had just walked out of the house. They seemed to be a little panicked. However, when they saw the natives, their footsteps slowed down. In front of these natives, they still had to maintain the demeanor of gods. The city lord took the lead and knelt down in front of these gods. The rest of the higher-ups also knelt down devoutly. The city lord said sincerely, "Lord gods, the war between the blood breeds and the werewolves is imminent. Tianlin City will also suffer a great calamity. Please save us, Lord gods." The rest of the people followed and said in unison, "Please save us, Lord gods. Please save us, Lord gods." Hearing this, those people looked at each other. One of the young men shook his head and laughed. "You have done too many evil deeds. This is the punishment from the heavens called heavenly tribulation. You can't hide." As he said this, he chuckled a few times, activated his hover skates and flew out of the city. The rest of the level 10 scavengers also activated their hover skates and quickly flew out of the city. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the distant night sky. They were escaping from the Blood Wolf Star. Seeing these gods leave, the city lord and the rest of the people's hearts sank. They were going to be punished by the heavens again. They would not be able to escape this fate. The city lord turned around and spoke to the rest of the higher-ups with a pained voice. "Perhaps the gods are right. We have done too much evil. This is the punishment of the heavens." Everyone was silent. Let's talk about the 10 or so LV-10 scavenger hunters. After leaving Tianlin City, they flew to the nearest coordinates. However, they realized that there were vampires everywhere near the coordinates. They had no choice but to rush to another coordinate. However, when they arrived at the coordinates, they discovered that those coordinates were also filled with vampires. They rushed to the third coordinate. However, he discovered that the third coordinate had already been occupied by werewolves. F***ck, these guys aren't here for us, are they? Of course, he was just complaining in anger. Of course, these vampires and werewolves weren't here for them. In the eyes of the vampires and werewolves, there was no distinction between natives and outsiders. In their eyes, these were all humans. Lowly and weak humans. Now all 3 coordinates were occupied and they could not leave the Blood Wolf Star. It was extremely dangerous to stay in the wilderness at night. Someone suggested, "Let's go back to Tianlin City first. When the vampires and werewolves attack Tianlin City, the coordinates will be empty. At that time we will take the opportunity to rush back to the flame-beginning continent." The rest nodded. They had placed several wireless cameras in the distance of the 3 coordinates. Then they rushed back to Tianlin City. The citizens of Tianlin City were surprised to see the sky celestials return to Tianlin City. "The gods are back. Are they here to save us? That's great. With the gods here, no matter how strong the werewolves and vampires are, they won't dare to attack Tianlin City." Those gods had returned to Tianlin City, but they did not pay attention to the natives. They went straight to their own residences and connected to the wireless cameras. They were waiting for the vampires and werewolves to start fighting. Finally, more than 100,000 werewolves and more than 1,000,000 vampires met in the wilderness. Both sides stopped at a distance of 500 meters. The Blood Clan members covered the sky and floated in the air. More than 100,000 werewolves stopped on the ground and faced each other from a distance. Then, they did not break out into a great battle as everyone had expected. Instead, they turned their heads and headed in one direction. That direction was Heaven's Descent City. When the citizens of the flame-beginning continent saw this scene through the cameras, they were all shocked. What the hell? The vampires and werewolves are natural enemies. Why aren't they fighting? Why are they all heading toward Tianlin City? The carefree young man chuckled and said, "What's there to be afraid of? Once they move, the coordinates will be empty. Let's look at the coordinates. When it's safe, we'll go over immediately." Thus, everyone switched the camera lens to the coordinates. But at this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. They saw that the first coordinate was not empty. More than 10,000 vampires were guarding it. Everyone frowned. What the hell? Let's look at the second coordinate. They switched the cameras to the second coordinate. Then they saw more than 10,000 vampires guarding it. Then they switched to the third coordinate. There were about 1,000 werewolves standing guard at the coordinates. Everyone was stunned when they saw this. What the hell? Are they really coming for us? The coordinates they're guarding are the coordinates we escaped from. They must be coming for us. As a result, the flaming continent's hunters began to panic. Damn it, we're finished. Think of a way, think of a way. What should we do? We can't beat them and we can't escape. What should we do? Just a moment ago these people thought they could stay out of this. But now they realized that these vampires and werewolves were coming for them. For a moment they were even more panicked than the natives of the city. At the same time in the wilderness, Immorse also realized that something was wrong. What the hell are these werewolves and vampires doing? How did they get together? Puzzled, Immorse did not act rashly. Instead he created a clone and secretly followed these people. As for his main body, he directly rushed to the third coordinate. There were more than 1,000 werewolves there and there should be 10 spiritualists. Chapter 393. When a large number of vampires and werewolves were heading toward Tianlin City, Immorse headed toward the third coordinate. There were more than 1,000 werewolves at the third coordinate, which meant that there were at least 100 spiritualists there. A moment later he teleported 200 kilometers away from these people. At this point he didn't continue forward. After all, these 100 spiritualists weren't to be trifled with. If all 100 of their spiritual senses pressed down on him together, Immorse wouldn't be able to withstand it. After pondering for a moment, Immorse had an idea. He condensed 99 doppelgangers. Now, after the upgrade of the system, Immorse's doppelgangers had also increased. He could now condense 100 doppelgangers. Each of the 99 doppelgangers held a guiding device and quickly teleported forward. The werewolf spiritualists at the third coordinate didn't use their spiritual senses to check their surroundings all the time. And with so many werewolves here, there was no need for them to check their surroundings all the time. This gave Immorse's doppelgangers an opportunity. They all teleported to a place about 1,000 meters away from these werewolves. Then they all used their guides and aimed at the werewolf spiritualists here. Soon they had marked the 10 spiritualists here. At this moment, Immorse, who was 200 kilometers away, had already set up his sniper rifle. The moment the targets were marked, 10 targets appeared in his sniper scope. They were marked as number 1, number 2, all the way to number 99. Immorse said softly, "Target number 1." His right index finger gently pulled the trigger. Bang! There was a loud bang. The bullet left the muzzle and disappeared. The next moment, it appeared in front of a werewolf spiritualist 200 kilometers away. The spiritualist felt that something was wrong. He quickly tried to condense his telekinesis. However, bang, his upper body had already exploded into a bloody mist. At the same time, Immorse's index finger continued to pull the trigger 100 times. Don't doubt Immorse's hand speed. As a level 10 hunter, his hand speed was unimaginable to ordinary people. It was just a sniper rifle, but it had the firing speed of a machine gun. Bang 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 bang. 200 kilometers away, the remaining 99 spirit readers also had their heads blown off. All the werewolves were shocked to see this. Enemy. Damn it, transform. Damn it, transform. Damn it, transform. As a result, almost all of the 1,000 werewolves transformed into werewolves amidst their curses. However, after losing the psychic, these werewolves posed no threat to Immorse. Immorse held the mysterious Ice Devil Slayer saber and teleported to the middle of the werewolves. The mystic Ice Devil slaying saber slashed at a werewolf. Although the werewolf managed to avoid being hit in the vitals, its leg was still hit. He was secretly delighted. As long as it wasn't a vital point, the werewolf's recovery speed would heal the wound completely in a few minutes. However, just as this thought flashed through his mind, the surface of his body was rapidly frozen. At the same time, the cold air invaded his body. From the inside out, his body was quickly frozen into ice crystals. That was not all. His wound was still being corroded. Although all of this took a long time to describe, it actually happened in an instant. When the werewolf was frozen, within a few seconds, the area within 100 meters was completely frozen. All the werewolves within 100 meters were also completely frozen. Immorse's draconic thought swept across. Crash. All the ice wolves within 100 meters were shattered into blood-red gems on the ground. When the rest of the werewolves saw this, they were all shocked. In their memory, humans were very fragile. Even those so-called celestial gods from other worlds could not kill them one by one. They could even kill those celestial gods. However, they had never seen someone like this human who could kill hundreds of their brothers in a single blow. In shock and anger, they all rushed toward Immerse. However, this was exactly what Immerse wanted. He slashed out again. Once again, the area within 100 meters was frozen. And after 2 stacks, the ice layer within 100 meters had reached more than a meter thick. With a sweep of the draconic thought, these werewolves were once again turned into broken ice. This time the remaining werewolves finally learned their lesson. They did not dare to attack Immerse again. Instead they stayed outside the range of Immerse's ice layer and thought of countermeasures. Immerse did not give them a chance. With a teleport he appeared behind another werewolf. With a slash of the blade, the area within 100 meters was once again frozen. When the remaining 500 werewolves saw this, they did not dare to stay any longer and hurriedly fled in all directions. Immerse would not give them any chance. He constantly used teleportation to keep up with these werewolves. The mysterious ice devil slaying blade was constantly harvesting lives. In just 5 minutes, more than 1,000 werewolves were all killed by Immerse. Not a single one was left alive. At the same time, a message appeared in his mind. Frowny face killed 100 spiritual psychics, obtained 100 strands of draconic thought. Then he looked at the numbers in his mind. Frowny face draconic thought. 1871000. After dealing with these guys, the next step was to wait and see what the blood kindred and werewolves were up to. At the same time, in Sky's Descent City, the dozen or so hunters from the Flaming Dawn continent had seen Zhou Xian kill so many werewolves on his own through the surveillance cameras. And he even had the unique skill of creating clones. They were all very surprised. Is this the mysterious strong man? What a good job. He killed more than 1,000 werewolves alone. This is too crazy. Looking at his strength, he should be at least a level 3 hunter. Amidst the surprise, they were also pleasantly surprised. He killed all the werewolves at the 3rd coordinate. We can teleport over immediately. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. Let's go. Hence, these dozen or so people once again activated their hovershoes. Under the surprised and angry gazes of the people in Sky's Descent City, they flew into the distance. The 3rd coordinate was not far from Sky's Descent City. A moment later they had already bypassed the blood kindred and werewolves and arrived at the 3rd coordinate. At this time, Immerse was wiping his sniper rifle while thinking about how to deal with the spiritual psychics among the werewolves. As far as he was concerned, the only thing that could threaten him was those spiritual psychics. In fact, it was not difficult for him to kill these spiritual psychics. As long as he took out the sea dragon clone, he could easily kill these spiritual psychics. However, he had already asked the system before. The system's answer was, using the sea dragon clone to kill these spiritual psychics would not allow him to obtain draconic thought. This was a headache. Just as he was thinking hard about a solution, the draconic thought suddenly detected that the dozen or so people were flying over. Soon those people also arrived at the coordinates. They looked at the ice shards all over the ground and the world within 1,000 meters that had been frozen into ice crystals. Now that they were there, they could feel Immerse's power even more. Chapter 394. The dozen or so level 10 hunters had heard of a mysterious powerhouse before. Now they finally saw him in person. Mysterious powerhouse. Thank you so much. If it weren't for you, we would probably have died on the Blood Wolf Star. I will never forget your kindness for the rest of my life. These people spoke one after another. However, they didn't think so in their hearts. The reason why they had come to the Blood Wolf Star this time was because of this guy. They had returned empty-handed and almost lost their lives here. He was the one who killed almost all the vampires outside the city. If it weren't for him, they might have already succeeded in their training and become desolate hunters. However, they only thought about it in their hearts and didn't show it on their faces. At this time, they just wanted to leave this damned place and return to their sect. After returning to the sect, they would report this kid to the sect. At that time, this kid would have to bear the consequences. Immerse didn't intend to pay attention to these guys. However, with his caution, he naturally wouldn't let these people leave casually. He directly plundered these people's memories to check. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart, seeing these people salute him with their fists and then say goodbye to him. In Immerse's hand, the mysterious ice devil slaying blade appeared. However, this time he controlled the mysterious ice devil slaying blade with his dragon thoughts. It was like a blood-red meteor, flying towards a level 10 hunter in an instant. It pierced through that person's body. That person's body was quickly frozen. At the same time, the area within 100 meters was also frozen. The bodies of the dozen or so people were all frozen into ice sculptures. Even if they were turned into ice sculptures, their eyes were still filled with disbelief. They didn't expect that this guy, who looked very ordinary on the surface, would attack without warning, without even saying a word. They didn't even have time to react. In fact, even if they reacted, what could they do? Would they be able to escape if they reacted? Not to mention that they had resentment toward Immerse in their hearts. Even if they didn't, would Immerse let them go? They had already seen the strength that Immerse had displayed. Once they returned to the sect, they would definitely report back to the sect. Their sects knew that he was so strong and had so many strange skills. Thinking about it, it was obvious that there would be some who coveted his secrets and wanted to harm him. By the time these people were dealt with, the Blood Tribe and werewolves had already arrived at Sky Descent City. Just as all the humans in Sky's Descent City were trembling with fear, the leader of the werewolves stepped forward. It was a muscular man who looked to be in his 30s. He was wearing a sleeveless singlet and his muscles were bulging. It was obvious that he was the strength type. Alpha Wolf Victor. He stood in front of all the werewolves and vampires and shouted to the people on the city wall. Humans of Heaven's Descent City, you don't have to worry or be afraid. Our target this time is not you. When the people of Heaven's Descent City heard this, they all looked at each other. The vampires and werewolves stopped fighting? You don't want to fight humans anymore? If the target was not the humans of Heaven's Descent City, then who was it? Victor the Alpha continued. We have a common enemy, which is your so-called heavenly gods. They are not heavenly gods but humans from another world. Now you should know the truth. Victor then told them about the Flaming Dawn continent and the hunting ground. These humans were all very surprised. The people of another world actually treated the Sirius Star as a huge hunting ground? And they, the humans, vampires and werewolves, were just prey in this huge hunting ground? This sounded too unbelievable. More than half of them did not believe it. However, as long as the werewolves and vampires did not attack them, they would listen to whatever the werewolves said. Now hand over the fake heavenly gods in your city. In the future we, the werewolves, vampires and humans, will be united against the enemy. When the city lord heard this, he hurriedly said, they just flew away, escaped. At the same time, similar scenes were happening in the other cities of the Sirius Star. All the werewolves and vampires were approaching the human cities, demanding that they hand over the fake heavenly gods. The humans could only hand over the scavengers. And the fate of these hunters was to be executed. There were thousands of cities on the Sirius Star. In each city, there were at least a dozen scavengers and at most 1,000 scavengers. In the end, more than 50,000 scavengers were killed by the werewolves. At the same time, Victor stood on the city wall. He ordered all the werewolves, vampires and humans. Now all the fake heavenly gods are dead. There is only one fake heavenly god left on the Sirius Star. Remember this face, it's him. As he spoke, a huge flag was raised beside him. On the flag there was a person's portrait. This person was none other than Immerse. Alpha Wolf Victor pointed at Immerse's portrait and said loudly, this fake heavenly god is much stronger than the other heavenly gods. But we have 7 million werewolves, nearly 100 million vampires and 30 million humans in the world. If we work together we will be invincible. The werewolves, vampires and humans below raised their right arms and shouted in unison, kill the fake heavenly gods, invincible. Kill the fake heavenly gods, invincible. Kill the fake heavenly gods, invincible. Victor the Alpha continued. Now let's start with one of his clones. As he spoke, his right hand pointed at Immerse's clone, who was disguised as a native. In the next moment, a werewolf spiritualist used his spiritual sense to envelop Immerse's clone and threw him high into the air. Immerse's clone couldn't move at all. The werewolf spiritualist controlled him and circled him. The Alpha Wolf Victor said loudly, remember this face, remember this human. Now everyone go to the east. At the foot of Karen Mountain. He's there. As he spoke, he clenched his right fist. Bang. Immerse's clone in the air suddenly exploded into a cloud of blood mist. In the next moment, all the werewolves, vampires and humans rushed to the east. At the same time, Immerse, who was at the foot of Karen Mountain, felt all of this through his clone. He was very surprised. This alpha wolf Victor actually knew so much. Although he knew from the memories of other werewolf spiritualists that this wolf Victor wasn't simple, he didn't expect it to be so complicated. It turned out that this wolf Victor had already advanced to become a level 2 spiritualist. After becoming a level 2 spiritualist, he awakened a talent, foresight. In other words, he could know many things in advance. That was why he knew about the flaming land and the hunting ground. That was why he knew about Immerse and his clone. Of course, he didn't know everything in advance. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been unaware of Immerse's sneak attack on the third coordinate. Chapter 395. At this moment, Immerse was very surprised. This alpha wolf actually had the ability to foresee things. This ability was really abnormal. If he hadn't met him, this guy would have been the main character. It was a pity that he had met him. In his story, he was just a small supporting character. He was just a small character who couldn't survive more than 3 chapters and had to receive a box lunch. As far as Immerse knew, this Victor's prophetic talent had only awakened not long ago, so it wasn't very powerful yet. For some big events and truths he could be 100% prophetic. That was why he knew so much about the truth of the Flaming Land and the Blood Wolf Star. However, for some small events, the probability of him being able to foresee was very small. Therefore, Immerse didn't have to worry too much. These guys were all here to catch him, right? Very well, I'll wait for you here. Thinking of this, Immerse scattered his more than 100 clones and hid in all directions. He used the camouflage concealment skill to hide well. As for himself, he stayed at the foot of the mountain and set up his sniper rifle. More than 2 hours later, the first echelon of about 100,000 vampires and 7,000 werewolves had arrived. Among the 7,000 werewolves, there were more than 700 spiritualists. Immerse let his clones mark the more than 30 spiritualist werewolves gathered within a radius of 100 meters. Then he quickly pulled the trigger. Bang 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 bang. The sniper rifle once again had the firing speed of a machine gun. There was a need to explain here. An ordinary sniper rifle, no matter how fast it was pulled, couldn't have the firing speed of a machine gun. Even the sniper rifle of the Flaming Land couldn't. However, Immerse's sniper rifle was a product of the system. Even if Immerse's hand speed was 10 times faster, it could still fire 10 times faster than a machine gun. After blowing up more than 30 spiritualist werewolves, Immerse had already teleported into the group of werewolves. Then the mystic ice devil slaying blade in his hand instantly slashed down. Within a radius of 100 meters, everything was sealed in ice. The more than 30 spiritualist werewolves could no longer recover. At the same time, the rest of the spiritual psychics had already discovered Immerse. Their spiritual senses quickly blasted towards Immerse. Immerse hurriedly teleported 1,000 kilometers away. Just as he was about to teleport, he could feel an overwhelming pressure pressing down on him. Fortunately, in the next moment he had already appeared 1,000 kilometers away. He heaved a sigh of relief. It was too dangerous. It was too dangerous. It seemed that he had to think of a more reliable method. But then again, to be able to obtain 30 strands of dragon wool within a second was still very satisfying. At the same time, 1,000 kilometers away, the 100,000 Blood Tribe members and the 7,000 werewolves watched the kid kill more than 200 werewolves right under their noses. They were all shocked and furious. He was shocked because that guy had killed over 200 werewolves in a single second. His strength was far beyond their imagination. He was angry because that fellow was too lawless, completely disregarding the werewolves and vampires. Especially when there were more than 700 werewolf spiritual psychics here. In shock and anger, the leader of this group of werewolves and vampires shouted loudly, "All spiritual psychics, be vigilant and open your spiritual senses to the maximum." Therefore, all 700 werewolf spiritual psychics opened their spiritual senses to the maximum. At the same time, Immerse already had a countermeasure in mind. He had the 100 clones that had not yet been exposed mark more than 40 of the closest spiritual psychics. Then he directly released the Sea Dragon clone. The Sea Dragon clone directly transformed into its combat form. Now that Immorse had been promoted to a level 10 hunter, his sea dragon clone had also become a level 10 mutated wild beast. Its length had reached 1,000 meters. Then this 1,000-meter-long sea dragon clone teleported and appeared among the werewolves and vampires. Then its 400-meter-long giant tail swept across. Bang 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 bang. A large group of blood tribe members was directly swept into meat paste. Another teleportation and another large group of blood tribe members was swept into meat paste. This sudden appearance of this huge creature shocked all the vampires and werewolves. At this moment, everyone's attention was focused on the sea dragon clone. They attacked the sea dragon clone. All the spiritual psychics also attacked the sea dragon clone, created illusions and even tried to control the sea dragon clone's consciousness. However, the sea dragon clone was a full 9 levels higher than them. Under the absolute suppression of levels, no amount of fancy tricks would be of any use. It was also at this moment that Immorse's consciousness returned to his main body. Then the sniper rifle fired continuously. Bang 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 bang. More than 40 spiritual psychics were instantly blown into a bloody mist. In the next moment, Immorse teleported and appeared on the scene. In an instant the surrounding 100 meters were frozen. In his mind, another system notification came: frowny face, 43 spiritual psychics killed, 43 strands of dragon consciousness obtained. Then, Immorse teleported again and escaped. In the end he was pleasantly surprised to find that not many spiritual psychics had noticed him in a short period of time. So he once again marked dozens of spiritual psychics. Doing the same he killed more than 50. This time the spiritual psychics finally discovered Immorse. However, they didn't dare to use all their dragon consciousness on Immorse. After all, they still had to deal with that huge creature. The sea dragon clone took the lives of countless vampires with a simple sweep of its tail. The werewolf's self-healing ability was strong and the sweep couldn't kill them. However, Immorse didn't want the sea dragon clone to kill them. The sea dragon clone only needed to attract the attention of all the spiritual psychics. In fact, the sea dragon clone did far more than Immorse imagined. It kept wandering around these spiritual psychics, herding them together. This way Immorse's clones would be able to mark more people. Immorse could also kill more spiritual psychics in one go. After about an hour he finally killed all 733 spiritual psychics. At this moment he took a look at his mind. Dragon consciousness 9071000. As long as he killed less than 100 spiritual psychics, his dragon consciousness would level up. Next, Immorse didn't waste time dealing with the remaining vampires and werewolves. Instead he left them to the sea dragon clone to deal with. As for himself, he had already commanded the 100 clones to ambush the next batch of werewolves. The second batch of werewolves was much more numerous. Reached 15,000. Among them, the number of spiritual psyche masters reached 1,500. 1,500 spiritual reader masters. This was definitely a rather shocking number. Of course, for Immorse this was also quite a lot of dragon consciousness. Too many things have happened in the past month. My child is sick and hospitalized, my father is hospitalized, my mother-in-law has a fracture and my wife has an exam. I can keep 8 of them busy by myself. As a result, he spent less time on the books. I forgot a lot of things that I wrote before. The dragon shadow step that I wrote before seems to have reached great success and can move 1,000 kilometers. But it doesn't seem like it. I flipped through some chapters but couldn't find it. I'll count it as 1,000 in the future. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry everyone. Chapter 396. Immorse used the blood dragon's eye to see the 1,500 spiritualists. He was secretly delighted. It seemed that the improvement of dragon will was not far away. Thinking of this, Immorse ordered the sea dragon clone to attract the attention of the werewolves and blood breeds again. He did the same thing and once again killed these spirit reader masters. Of course, these spiritualists quickly discovered Immorse. But so what if they discovered him? Firstly, they still needed to divert their attention to deal with the 1,000-meter-long sea dragon clone. Secondly, each time Immorse appeared he would only appear for a second at most. Moreover, his position was constantly changing. One moment he was in the east and the next moment he was in the west. It was difficult for them to truly grasp Immorse's true position while dealing with the sea dragon clone. Just like that, another 10 minutes passed. After killing another batch of spiritualists, A system prompt appeared in Immerse's mind. Frowny face dragon will. 10001000. You can advance. Do you want to advance now? Immerse nodded. Advance. This advancement will take 5 minutes. During the advancement you will not be able to use dragon will. The system reminded him. Immerse immediately entered his dragon cave. When he couldn't use dragon will, it was better to enter his dragon cave. This was safe and could cultivate dragon will. 5 minutes later, a system prompt appeared in Immerse's mind. Frowny face dragon will advancement successful. Immerse looked at his attributes. Name, Immerse. Level 10 scavenger, level 6 long Xianxia. Evolution direction, Titan dragon. He had finally reached level 6 long Xianxia. Immerse's dragon will spread out. He could see everything within a 300-kilometer radius. He could clearly feel that the dragon will was much stronger than before. However, he still had to test how much stronger it was through battle. After leaving the dragon cave, he teleported and once again arrived on the battlefield. This time he didn't use a sniper rifle or the mysterious ice devil slaying blade. Instead he teleported not far away from a level 1 spiritualist. The level 1 psychic saw Immerse appear and then looked at Immerse's sea dragon avatar, which was still far away from him. Without hesitation he sent all of his spiritual senses towards Immerse. Immerse also sent out his draconic will. However, he did not press down on his opponent. Instead he cautiously wrapped his entire body. When the spiritual psyche master's spiritual psyche pressed down on Immerse's body, the enormous dragon psyche surrounding Immerse didn't move at all. The long Xianxia was shocked when he saw this. How did this guy's spiritual senses increase so much in just 5 minutes? This was illogical. Thinking of this, he hurriedly wanted to call the other spiritual psychics. However, at this moment, Immerse's draconic will moved. It was a direct counter-suppression. Almost instantly, the spiritual thoughts of the spiritual psyche master were suppressed back into his body. The spiritual psychic was pressured by Immerse's dragon's will. His eyes were bulging, his face was red, and his blood vessels were clearly visible. The next moment, bang! It directly exploded. This was the powerful effect of Immerse's draconic will leveling up. An increase in draconic will by 1 level was equivalent to an increase in long Xianxia by 2 levels. Therefore, Immerse's draconic will was equivalent to a level 2 spiritual psychic. And it was a level 2 peak spiritual psychic. Killing a mere level 1 spiritual psychic was naturally not a problem. Moreover, Immerse's draconic will killed the werewolf spiritual psychic at the cellular level. Therefore he didn't even have a chance to heal himself. Phew, Immerse let out a long breath. Previously these spiritual psychics were the greatest threat to him. But now, after the draconic will leveled up, the threat no longer existed. He took another look at his mind. He saw a display in his mind. Frowny face draconic will 11000000. In other words, the next time the draconic will leveled up he would need to kill 100,000 werewolf spiritual psychics. Seemed like a huge number. However, after Immerse's draconic will leveled up, killing these werewolf spiritual psychics was not a problem at all. At this moment hundreds of werewolves and blood breeds around Immerse had already discovered him. They attacked him one after another. Immerse's draconic will moved. Bang 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 bang. All the werewolves and blood breeds felt an incomparably huge pressure on their bodies at that moment. Then their bodies exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Following that, Immerse's draconic will spread out once again. It directly attacked the 10 spiritual psychics. With his current draconic will, it was impossible for him to kill 100 spiritual psychics in one go. However, he could still carry more than 1,000 spiritual psychics and kill 10 spiritual psychics in one go. The next moment, bang 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 bang. The bodies of the 10 spiritual psychics also exploded into a cloud of blood mist. A notification came from his mind. Frowny face killed 10 level 1 spiritual psychics. Obtained 10 strands of draconic will. Draconic will. 11100000. When the other spiritual psychics saw this, they were all shocked. They spiritual psychics were definitely the strongest existences on the entire Blood Wolf star. But now, in front of this kid, they were like paper. Thinking of this, all the more than 1,000 spiritual psychics used their spiritual psychics to communicate. Let's go together. With the spiritual psychics of more than 1,000 of us, I don't believe that we can't crush him to death. 3, 2, 1, go. Thus, the spiritual psychics of more than 1,000 people joined forces to form a huge mountain and press down on Immerse. However, under the pressure of more than 1,000 people's spiritual psychics, Immerse's draconic will only paused slightly. In the next moment he used his draconic will to protect himself while pressing down on the 10 spiritual psychics. Bang 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 bang. Simple and crude. The 10 spiritual psychics and werewolves exploded into a cloud of blood mist again. In his mind the system notification came again. Frowny face killed 10 level 1 spiritual psychics. Obtained 10 strands of draconic will. Draconic will. 211000000. With the strength of one person he was able to withstand more than 1,000 spiritual psychics and kill the 10 spiritual psychics on the spot. All the spiritual psyche masters present were aghast. This fellow's spiritual psychics were too strong. Just as they were shocked, Immerse's draconic will had already attacked once again. Bang 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 bang. Another 10 spiritual psychics were killed by him. Killed 10 level 1 spiritual psychics. Obtained 10 strands of draconic will. Draconic will. 311000000. After killing 50 spiritual psychics in a row, the remaining spiritual psychics all panicked. He's too strong. Don't act rashly. Retreat a certain distance first and wait for reinforcements. A werewolf roared. The other werewolves and blood breeds also retreated, including those spiritual psychics. However, it was better if they didn't return. Once they retreated, their psychic power wouldn't be so uniform. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Immerse quickly used his telekinesis to suppress the 100 spiritual readers. Bang 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 bang. The 100 spiritual psychics also instantly exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Killed 100 level 1 spiritual psychics. Obtained 100 strands of draconic will. Draconic will. 151100000. In a second 100 strands of draconic will entered his account. This really made Immerse feel good in his heart. As a result, those spiritual psychics were even more chaotic. This way it was even more convenient for Immerse. The draconic will pressed over again. Bang 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 bang. Minus 100 spiritual psychics exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Killed 100 level 1 spiritual psychics. Obtained 100 strands of draconic will. Draconic will. 251100000. Chapter 397. When those werewolf spiritualists worked together, it wouldn't be so easy for Immerse to kill them. He could only kill 10 at a time. And when they were in a mess, it was much easier for Immerse to kill them. He could easily kill 100 of them. As for the other werewolves and vampires, they were terrified when they saw the strongest spiritualists among them exploding into a bloody mist. With the sea dragon clone around, they could only turn around and run away quickly. With a thought, Immerse ordered his sea dragon doppelganger to kill them all. Now, Immerse planned to raise his dragon will to level 7 as soon as possible. That way he would be safer when facing these level 1 spiritualists. Therefore he didn't have the time to deal with these ordinary werewolves and vampires. The sea dragon clone didn't hold back either. It opened its mouth and swallowed more than 50 werewolves. Immerse focused all his energy on dealing with these spiritualists. Each time he could kill 100 spiritualists. The numbers in his mind were also constantly jumping. Dragon will. 351100000. Dragon will. 451100000. Dragon will. 551100000. In the end, after killing this wave of spiritualists, his dragon will stopped at a number. Frowny face dragon will. 555100000. Immerse didn't pay any more attention to the remaining werewolves and vampires. He let the sea dragon clone destroy them all. At this moment, within a 5-kilometer radius, there was a layer of blood mist. Even the blood moon in the sky couldn't penetrate this layer of blood mist. Then, under his investigation, the third and fourth waves of attacks had arrived. These two waves combined, there were 13,000 spiritualists among them. Immerse's heart was bursting with joy. He wasn't afraid that there were too many spiritualists, but he was afraid that there weren't enough of them. He was still the same as before, lying in ambush in place, waiting for this large wave of vampires and zombies to arrive. These werewolves and vampires smelled the thick blood mist here. They also smelled the scent of werewolves and vampires. They quickly raised their vigilance. However, it was already too late. Bang 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 bang. Without any warning, the bodies of the 100 spiritualists suddenly exploded into 100 clouds of blood mist. At this moment, the rest of the werewolves and vampires finally understood where the blood mist came from. Alert! Careful! However, their vigilance came a little too late. Bang 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 bang. Another 100 spiritual readers suddenly exploded into a bloody mist. Only then did the remaining 1,100 or so spiritual readers react. One by one, they condensed their spiritual senses and scanned the surroundings. Soon they discovered Immorse. Their spiritual senses pressed down on Immorse one after another. Instantly, an enormous pressure caused Immorse's dragon will to shrink rapidly. It wasn't that Immorse's draconic will wasn't strong enough, but that there were simply too many of them. The spiritual senses of 11,000 psychic trainers were no joke. However, it only reduced Immorse's spiritual sense fandom from 300 kilometers to 50 kilometers. It wouldn't be of any help to their current battle situation. In addition, at this moment, a huge creature that was 1,000 meters long suddenly appeared on the battlefield. With a sweep of its tail, it wiped out hundreds of vampires. This caused the scene to instantly become chaotic. Those spiritual readers also focused more of their attention on the huge creature that had suddenly appeared. After all, in their perception, this huge creature was much more dangerous than this human. And when their attention was on the sea dragon clone, Immorse's draconic will had already been activated again. 10. He continued to kill these spirit reader masters. In the beginning, these spiritual psyche masters relied on their numbers to constantly counterattack Immorse. But as time passed, they realized that they couldn't stop this spiritual reader at all. Moreover, their companions kept exploding one after another. This made every one of them tremble in fear. No one knew if they would be the next one. Just like that, Immorse killed more than 200 spiritual readers one by one. The other spiritual readers finally panicked. They couldn't stop this powerful spiritual reader at all. And this spiritual reader's target was very obvious. It was all the spiritual readers present. If they didn't escape, they would definitely die at the hands of this spiritual reader. Therefore, their only way out was to escape. And when they escaped, things would be even easier. Immorse's draconic will quickly spread out. Bang 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 bang. 100 spiritual readers instantly exploded into a bloody mist. As a result, these spiritual psyche masters were frightened. Just now it was 10 by 10. This time hundreds of them exploded. Then no one knew if 1,000 would explode next. With this thought in mind, these spirit reader masters became even more flustered. They hurriedly scattered in all directions. Bang 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 bang. The more panicked they were, the faster they exploded. In addition, the sea dragon clone was constantly disturbing their minds. It could be said that Immorse had no difficulty in killing them now. After spending about 2 hours, Immorse had killed all of the 10,000 plus spiritual readers here. His draconic will had also reached 15,000. At the same time in Tianlin City, Alpha Wolf Victor had also seen that several waves of werewolves had been killed by Immorse. His heart was filled with shock and anger. He thought that with so many werewolves and blood breeds, it wouldn't take much effort to capture a human. But he didn't expect that the werewolves would lose more than 100,000 werewolves and more than 16,000 werewolf spiritual readers. This human was actually so powerful. And that terrifying monster, with a sweep of its tail, hundreds of blood breeds died. Its huge mouth could swallow dozens of werewolves. Facing such a combination, the werewolves and blood breeds' advantage in numbers didn't have any effect at all. Preposterous. Preposterous. In his anger, he began to use his prophetic ability. Soon an image appeared in his mind. At first, the image was just very blurry. But gradually the image became clearer. He saw millions of blood breeds and millions of werewolves. So many blood breeds and werewolves surrounded that human in the center. There was no way out for him. In the end, his body swayed a few times and slowly fell to the ground. Seeing this, Wolf Victor couldn't help but feel happy. This image was enough. According to his many previous experiences, no matter how the process developed, the result was often the image he saw. In other words, this kid's ending was destined. Therefore, he immediately ordered, all blood breeds and werewolves, rush to the target location at full speed. Kill that human if you don't know the price. The Blood Wolf planet's communication was relatively backward. But even so, within 5 hours his order had already spread throughout the Blood Wolf planet. All werewolves, blood breeds and humans received the same order. Kill that human at all costs. Chapter 398. No one would have thought of it. At this moment the entire Blood Wolf star was carrying out a siege. Tens of millions of vampires and millions of werewolves were rushing to the same target location, intending to surround and kill the target. And this target was only a human. Of course, if they had to calculate more, their target was also that 1,000-meter-long monster. However, they were rushing to the target location, which was basically sending dragon thoughts to Immorse. Of course, as the number of werewolves and vampires increased, Immorse also had to change his strategy. He no longer rushed in and attacked with dragon thoughts. Instead, after killing 10 spirit readers, he teleported away. He went to another corner of the battlefield, teleported again, killed 10 people and escaped again. The cycle repeated. As for those spirit readers, they couldn't figure out his location at all. In this way, it didn't seem like these people were going to surround and kill him. Instead, it seemed like they were being hunted by him alone. Of course, that wolf Victor also knew about this situation. But at this moment he no longer thought about anything else. The image in his mind had already become the basis for all his decisions and judgments. He didn't care about the process, as long as the final result was enough. Thus, during this process, Immorse's dragon thoughts continued to increase. According to Earth's time, more than 10 days had passed. And in these 10 days, Immorse didn't stop for a moment. He continued to kill these spirit reader masters. The entire battlefield, with a radius of more than 100 kilometers, had long been enveloped by a thick blood fog. In the blood fog, the visibility was less than 10 meters. Moreover, the range of the blood fog was still expanding. And in these 10 days, Immorse was killing werewolf spirit readers almost every minute. The continuous killing made the killing intent on his body become stronger and stronger. Finally, on the 10th day, this killing intent actually formed a substance around his body. This murderous aura was like a blood mist, lingering around him within 100 meters. And as long as he willed, this blood fog would instantly turn into thousands of blood-red sharp blades, mincing any creature within 100 meters into meat paste. Immorse's pupils also changed from the initial black to dark red, bright red and blood red because of the continuous killing. At this moment he no longer had any other thoughts in his mind. There was only one thought in his mind: kill. At this point he no longer cared about the blood breed, the werewolf or the werewolf psychic master. In short, as long as it was something that his eyes could see and his dragon consciousness could detect, it would be his target. He wanted to kill them. He only wanted to kill. With such thoughts in mind, his mind was no longer as clear as before. At this moment, killing intent surged from his body. Behind him, a pair of blood-red wings spread out. His eyes were so red that they looked like they could bleed. He was like a demon king of slaughter. He did not know how long he had been killing for. He had no idea how many he had killed. Amidst this frenzied slaughter, a notification suddenly sounded in his mind. Dragon Will has reached 100,000. You can advance. This reminder woke him up abruptly. He went straight into his dragon cave. The redness in his eyes slowly receded. The murderous aura on his body also slowly receded. He sat cross-legged in the dragon cave. He kept taking deep breaths. After more than 2 hours, his eyes finally regained their clarity. The murderous aura on his body had also been completely withdrawn. Only then did he speak in his mind. Advance. This advancement will take 5 minutes. Dragon Will cannot be used during advancement. With the system's notification, the advancement began. During the advancement, Immorse recalled the state just now and felt a lingering fear. Even he was afraid of that state just now. He was on the verge of going berserk. If he continued to develop, he would definitely go berserk. At that time he would probably become a demon king who only knew how to kill. It seemed that he had to be more careful in the future. Thinking about it, after the Dragon Will advanced again, he would have more control over his heart. At that time it should not be so easy for him to go berserk again. A moment later, another notification sounded in his mind. Advancement successful. Name: Immorse. Level 10 Scavenger, Level 7 Long Yen Shi. Evolution direction: Titan dragon, he had finally advanced. There was no need to kill on such a large scale anymore. This made Immorse heave a sigh of relief. However, he did not go out immediately. Instead, he planned to wait. He would go out after his state of mind had completely calmed down. At the same time, in the outside world, the millions of Blood Clan members and millions of werewolves were all very strange after Immorse suddenly disappeared. At first they were all on high alert, worried that the kid would suddenly appear and attack them again. However, after a few hours there was no movement at all. Did the kid suddenly disappear just like that? Hence they started a carpet search around the area. In the end, at Assembly Point 3, they developed a clone of Immorse. Of course, they did not know that this was only Immorse's clone. They only knew that since their leader had asked them to kill this kid at all costs, they would do as they were told. However, this kid was really powerful, so they were very careful at first. However, after a few minutes they realized that for some reason, this kid did not seem as scary as before. Only then did they swarm forward and cut down Immorse's clone. In Sky's Descent City, when the Alpha Wolf Victor saw this scene, he was instantly overjoyed. Sure enough, it was exactly the same as the scene in his mind. Chapter 399. Usually, if the Alpha Wolf Victor didn't actively foresee the future, he wouldn't be able to see the future in his mind. But this time, when he was discussing something with the others, a scene suddenly appeared in his mind. The scene was somewhat blurry. It was like a mosaic of water monsters, flying saucers, and savages in any video. In the scene was a city. In this city, there were tens of thousands of human figures. It was just that it couldn't be seen clearly whether this figure was a vampire, a werewolf, or a human. At this moment, in the distant sky, a huge figure flew over. That huge figure was actually more than 100 meters long. Its body was more than 100 meters long, and it had huge wings that were nearly 100 meters wide. It glided toward the city. The people in the city continuously attacked this huge figure. However, no matter if it was arrows, spears, or rocks, they couldn't cause any damage to this huge figure. When this huge figure flew over the city, it suddenly spat out a flame. The city instantly turned into a sea of fire. In the sea of fire, the creatures in the city roared, wailed, and rolled about. Just a flame was enough to turn the city into a purgatory. Then that figure flapped its wings and flew into the sky again, swaggering away. Seeing this scene, the Alpha Wolf Victor couldn't help but tremble. Although the scene was mosaic and he couldn't see clearly what that huge black figure was. But from the bottom of his heart he could feel how powerful that creature was. In front of that creature even he felt that he was so small. Victor looked at the city outside the window and said to the werewolves and human higher-ups, "Retreat. Retreat. Everyone retreat from Tianlin City." Those humans and vampires didn't know how powerful Victor's prophetic ability was. But all the werewolves knew how powerful their leader's prophetic ability was. In the past, their leader's every decision was absolutely correct. Therefore, they didn't have any doubts. They immediately got up and walked out, beginning to issue orders to the rest of the werewolves to retreat from the city. Seeing that almost all the werewolves had begun to retreat, the vampires hesitated for a few minutes and also began to give the order to retreat. As for those humans, the werewolves and vampires wouldn't care. Humans were too weak to be of much help in battle. Therefore, they didn't care whether humans lived or died. Within a short hour, the werewolves and vampires had all retreated from Skyfall City. The entire Sky's Descent City had returned to the hands of the humans in this short period of time. All the humans were dumbfounded. These werewolves and vampires had suddenly come and gone. Humans, on the other hand, knew nothing about it. Meanwhile, in the wilderness, Immorse was looking for a target. Although his fists were powerful, the werewolf's self-healing ability was too strong. His fists could not kill it. Therefore he only had one target, the blood breeds. Moments later, his draconic will detected the locations of over 1,000 blood breeds. Then with a thought he teleported into the midst of the blood descendants. The vampires were resting on the spot. Seeing Immorse's sudden appearance, everyone was taken aback. After all, the battle prowess Immorse had displayed earlier was simply too fearsome. Even the spiritualists among the werewolves had been hunted down by this fellow. Wouldn't it be a matter of minutes for the bloodlings like them? In fact, they did want to fight. After Immorse appeared, he threw a punch at a level 10 evolved vampire. Bang! That level 10 evolved vampire was unable to resist at all. His brain exploded into a bloody mist. Then Immorse started punching and kicking. With every punch he could blow up 1 or even 2 or 3 vampires' heads. If he was lucky he could blow up 4 or 5 vampires' heads with a kick. Seeing this, the surrounding vampires swarmed forward, wanting to kill Immorse. However, when they swarmed over, Immorse only needed to slightly suppress them with his draconic will. Most of the vampires couldn't even move. Only a small group of vampires that Immorse had purposely left behind could move. However, these vampires couldn't move at all when they saw their companions. They were terrified and hurriedly turned to escape. But where could they escape to? Although they were fast, they were nothing in front of Immorse's draconic will. They were easily killed by Immorse's punches. After killing this small group of vampires, Immorse's draconic will let go of another small group of vampires. This group of vampires had some guts. They didn't run away. Instead they took out all of their special skills and attacked Immorse. However, as long as Immorse teleported away, all of their moves would fall through. Under Immorse's violent suppression, this small group of vampires was all killed by Immorse in less than half a minute. Then batch after batch of vampires were killed by Immorse. When the vampires in the distance saw Immorse's violence, they wanted to escape. However, under the pressure of Immorse's dragon sense, they felt as if they were being pressed down by 1,000 kilograms, unable to move. The werewolves who were resting nearby rushed over when they heard the news. When they saw Immorse slaughtering tens of thousands of werewolves on his own, they couldn't help but feel a little surprised. This human strength was terrifying. Although most of the werewolf spiritualists had been killed by Immorse, there were still some who escaped. At this moment, a werewolf spiritualist saw Immorse's violence and immediately spread out his draconic will. "Lowly human, how dare you be so arrogant? Die." In the blink of an eye, he sent his spiritual will towards Immorse. However, his action was noticed by Immorse. In the next moment, Immorse's enormous draconic will pressed down on his draconic will. The werewolf spiritualist felt Immorse's enormous telekinesis and was shocked. His draconic will was on a completely different level from this guy's telekinesis. This guy's telekinesis could almost crush him. He quickly retracted his draconic will to protect himself. However, in the next moment, bang, his body exploded into a bloody mist under Immorse's draconic will. His draconic will was only at level 1. Immorse's level 7 draconic will was equivalent to a level 4 spiritualist. Moreover, the quality of Immorse's draconic will was much better than that of a level 4 spiritualist. Even a level 4 spiritualist was nothing in front of Immorse. Moreover, this was only a level 1 spiritualist. After killing this level 1 spiritualist, Immorse continued to kill the vampires. As he continued to kill, he didn't dare to hear the system's notification in his mind. Killed a level 10 evolved blood breed. Obtained 10 drops of Titan dragon blood. Killed a level 10 evolved blood breed. Obtained 10 drops of Titan dragon blood. Chapter 400. Immorse spent more than half an hour to kill all the vampires here. Then he flew toward another group of vampires. Another half an hour later he slaughtered all the vampires. Just like that, Immorse slaughtered batch after batch of vampires. And these vampires couldn't do anything in front of the powerful Immorse. Their advantage in numbers was useless in front of Immorse. All the vampires within a few kilometers couldn't move at all under the suppression of the dragon will. After Immorse killed the dozen or so vampires, he continued to kill the other dozen or so vampires. Just like that, time passed minute by minute, second by second, and Immorse killed more and more werewolves. The amount of Titan dragon blood he consumed was also increasing. News of his strength and terror had spread throughout the entire Blood Wolf Star. That guy isn't human at all. He's too strong. Neither the werewolves nor the vampires can stop him. Why does he only kill vampires and not werewolves? Not really. He also kills werewolves. It's just that he only kills the spiritualists among the werewolves. This guy is a complete demon. The leader of the vampires had sent several groups of vampires to surround that guy. Last time that guy had the help of that huge monster, so they couldn't do anything to him. This time for some reason that huge monster didn't appear. So they thought that they could kill that guy with their advantage in numbers. However, reality proved that the leader of the vampires was wrong. That guy was really powerful. Just his telekinesis was enough to suppress the vampires around him. And he only released a few dozen vampires each time. Those vampires were no match for him at all and could only be killed instantly. Just like that, several waves of blood race encirclement ended in failure. The leader of the vampires had no choice but to look for the werewolf leader, Victor. Mr. Victor, the guy we were hunting before, has appeared again. Victor frowned when he heard that. You still have that huge monster with you? The leader of the vampires shook his head. This time, for some reason, that huge monster didn't appear. But his strength seems to have increased. We sent over 100,000 vampires to encircle him. However, it was suppressed by his powerful telekinesis and could not move at all. In the end, the 200,000 vampires were all killed by him, one punch after another. Alpha Wolf Victor frowned when he heard that. His telekinesis is that strong? The leader of the kindred said, I'm here to ask Mr. Victor for help in dealing with that human. Alpha Wolf Victor pondered for a moment and shook his head. If he's really as strong as you say, then even we, the werewolves, can't do anything. The leader of the kindred laughed bitterly. I heard that there is a group of level 2 spiritualists hidden among the werewolves. If you are willing to let them fight, we will also send out all the level 10 psychic masters. If we work together, we should be able to subdue that kid. Victor stared at the vampire leader. You vampires are investigating us werewolves? The vampire leader said with a smile. Likewise. You werewolves have also been investigating us vampires. Alpha Wolf Victor laughed and did not dwell on this issue. The vampire leader continued speaking. Mr. Victor said that we should let go of our past grudges and work together against the enemy. That human is too strong. We must work together with the werewolves. Otherwise, if he really destroys the entire vampire race, who knows if his next target will be the werewolves. Victor, the werewolf leader, was silent for a moment and nodded. What you said is not without reason. That guy is an outsider. Naturally, we have to work together to deal with him. We will do as you said. We will send out our spiritualists and you will send out all your telekinesis. We must destroy that kid. Therefore, Victor sent out 500 of his spiritualists. The vampires sent out almost all of their level 10 psychokinesis. Although the probability of the vampires producing a psychic master was very low, they had a large population. Therefore, the total number of psychic masters reached 50,000. Then these 500 spiritualists and 50,000 level 10 psychic masters rushed toward Immorse's location. However, as they were rushing to the battlefield, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. This figure was none other than the werewolf leader Victor. When the 500 werewolf spiritualists saw Victor, they naturally half-knelt and saluted him. When the 50,000 vampires saw the werewolves saluting, they hesitated for a moment and saluted as well. After all, they were working together now. If they did not salute the werewolf leader, there might be some hostility between them. Just as they lowered their heads to salute the werewolf leader, an enormous spiritual will suddenly enveloped all of the vampire psychic grandmasters. How could these vampire psychic masters be a match for the werewolf leader? Furthermore, they were caught off guard. They only felt that their psychokinesis was being sucked in by a huge force, and they couldn't help but be drawn toward the werewolf leader. Even if they used all of their methods, they could not stop their psychic powers from flowing away. They all turned pale with fright. Mr. Victor, what do you mean by this? Victor sneered. You vampires should not exist in this world. Take this opportunity to destroy all of the most powerful psychic masters in the vampire race. This is the right way. No, Mr. Victor. If we vampires are destroyed, you werewolves will not have it easy either. Victor sneered again. You don't have to worry about that. As he spoke, he increased the absorption rate. The psychic powers of all 50,000 level 10 psychic masters were absorbed by Victor. At this moment, his spiritual sense had finally increased by 1 level. He had reached level 3 psychic. Although the hunting ground master of the 10th hunting ground had limited the levels of the werewolves and vampires in this hunting ground, it had only limited their physical growth. However, it did not limit the growth of their psychic powers. This was because according to their previous experience with the environment of the Blood Wolf planet, the probability of producing a psychic master was very small. Even if they did produce a psychic reader, a level 1 psychic reader would be their limit. Therefore, there was no need to spend so much effort to limit them. However, they never expected that a peerless genius would appear on the Blood Wolf planet. Victor. With his talent, he had raised his spiritual sense to level 2. After so many years, he had reached the peak of level 2. However, no matter how strong his talent was, the environment of this planet was like this. He could not raise his spiritual sense by even half a step. Therefore, he came up with this idea to absorb the psychic powers of all the level 10 psychic masters of the vampire race to help him become a level 3 psychic. Chapter 401. Although the leader of the blood race had always been wary of Victor, he would never have dreamed that Victor would suddenly stab him in the back in the face of a strong enemy. Even Victor's subordinates, the 500 or so level 2 spiritualists, did not think of this. Victor had now advanced to level 3 spiritualist. He looked at the 500 confused werewolves in front of him. He said loudly, "You don't have to be surprised. If we werewolves want to break through this hunting ground and go to the real flaming continent, we have to keep improving ourselves. However, this is not enough. Even if I take you to the flaming dawn continent where there are as many experts as there are clouds, we will still be stones under their feet, stones that they can step on whenever they want. We will be meat on their chopping board. They will cut us if they want to. Therefore, we need to use all means to become even more powerful." The 500 level 2 werewolf spiritualists understood their leader's good intentions. They raised their right arms and said in unison, "Leader is wise." Victor nodded, then raised his head, stretched his arms and said passionately, "Now tell me loudly. Do you want to be prey in the hunting ground and be hunted by the people of the flaming continent, or do you want to be hunters and hunt the people of the flaming continent?" "Hunters! Hunters! Hunters!" All the werewolves shouted in unison. Victor continued to speak loudly. "Do you want to trample the lowly humans of the flaming continent under your feet? Do you want to turn them around and treat them as prey?" "Yes. Yes. Yes." All the werewolves' emotions were stirred up. Victor raised his arms. "If you want to follow me to the flaming continent and be hunters there, then now is the time to start." Before he finished speaking, his powerful spiritual thought suddenly enveloped all the werewolves. In the next moment, his spiritual thought began to extract the spiritual thoughts of the werewolves. All the werewolves were shocked. By the time they realized what Victor was thinking, it was already too late. In that instant, a third of their spiritual senses had been extracted by Victor. Their spiritual thought decreased while Victor's spiritual thought increased. Under such circumstances, there was not much they could do even if they wanted to resist. Moreover, they were controlled by Victor's spiritual thought. They could not escape even if they wanted to. "Leader, why are you doing this? Leader, we have always been loyal to you. Why are you doing this to us?" "Chief, didn't we agree to go to the flaming dawn continent together?" There was a sinister smile on Victor's face. He said, "Give me your spiritual sense and you will be with me forever. Wherever I go, all of you will go as well." Before he finished speaking, he stopped explaining. He increased the strength of the extraction. In an instant, the spiritual thoughts of all 500 werewolves entered Victor's body. At the same time, Victor's spiritual sense had advanced once again, reaching level 4. Victor spread out his spiritual senses. Sensing that everything within a radius of several hundred kilometers was under his control, he couldn't help but look up at the sky and howl at the moon. Roar! All living beings within a radius of several hundred kilometers trembled under his long howl. This was the suppression of the laws of nature. On this planet he was the absolute king. One of a kind. In fact, Victor had never thought about attacking the people of the flaming continent from the very beginning. He didn't even think about attacking Immorse. This was because he had already seen how strong Immorse's mutated dire beast was. Even if he was 10 times or 100 times stronger, he wouldn't be able to fight against that mutated dire beast. Therefore, he only took this opportunity to gather all the level 10 grand psychics of the blood race. He absorbed all of their psychic power. At the same time, he also took this opportunity to gather all the level 2 grand psychics of the werewolves for him to absorb. Now his spiritual sense level had reached level 4. Only when his strength reached this level would he have a certain degree of confidence to travel on the flaming dawn continent. In other words, everything he had done before was so that he could leave this planet. He would go to the flaming dawn continent himself. From the moment he knew that Immorse had appeared, he had never treated Immorse as an enemy. Now if necessary he could even treat Immorse as a partner. At the same time he also had a premonition that the huge black shadow he saw must be related to this guy. After thinking about it he turned his head and walked in the direction of Immorse. At this moment, Immorse didn't know about all of this. He was still killing non-stop. This time he felt that he was controlling it very well. Although he was killing non-stop he was always guarding his heart. And every few hours he would stop to take a breath. First he had time to devour the Titan dragon's blood that he had just obtained. Second he also calmed his state of mind so that he wouldn't be so violent. However, what he didn't know was that his eyes had started to turn red again. And the murderous aura on his body was slowly seeping out of his body. After killing for more than 2 hours, Immorse's eyes had become even redder. At this moment he no longer thought about anything and just guarded his heart. He also stopped thinking about anything and paused to calm his state of mind. Unknowingly he had already fallen into the same state of killing from before. There was only one thing he wanted to do: kill. In his mind there was only one word left: kill. He wanted to kill until the sky turned dark. He wanted to kill until the sun and moon lost their light. He wanted to destroy this world. More than 2 hours later, Victor, who was rushing to Immorse's location. His spiritual senses had already detected Immorse. It was also at this moment that an image appeared in his mind. In the image, a long saber in Immorse's hand chopped down on his head. His body was instantly sealed in ice. In the next moment, it shattered into blood-red ice shards on the ground. Seeing this scene, Victor's body couldn't help but tremble. He subconsciously stopped in his tracks and looked in the direction of Immorse. He didn't dare to use his spiritual senses to investigate again. Instead he turned around and ran in another direction. In his perception that guy was in a fit of anger at this moment. Whoever went up to provoke him would be unlucky. Even if he didn't have any ill intentions he would probably run straight into the muzzle of the gun if he went over. Therefore the plan now was to stay far away from that guy first. In fact, with Immorse's dragon senses, he had already discovered Victor when Victor was investigating him. But now there was only killing in his eyes. There were so many vampires in front of him, but he didn't want to go so far to kill a werewolf. He naturally wouldn't do such a thing. As time passed, the murderous aura around him became stronger and stronger. His eyes once again became as red as blood. There was only one thing he wanted to do now: kill. Chapter 402. As time went by, Immorse's eyes grew redder and redder. The murderous aura around him grew thicker and thicker. At the same time he was devouring more and more Titan dragon blood. He was getting closer and closer to a breakthrough. After a long time the moon gradually set in the west. The sun rose in the east. According to the time on the Flaming Land, Immorse had been here for 2 months. According to the rules of the 10th hunting ground, the 500,000 yuan ticket could only stay here for 2 months. For every extra day he stayed here he would be charged 10 times the price when he went back. Therefore many people would return to hunting island number 10 if they needed to stay here for 2 months. They would purchase a new ticket before coming back. After all, the 10th hunting island wouldn't let you stay here indefinitely for 500,000 yuan. However, Immorse didn't have these thoughts at this time. There was only one thought in his mind: kill. Naturally he didn't go back. When the sun rose on the 10th hunting island of the Flaming Land, the computers had already reported the people who hadn't returned yet. Among these people were those who died on the Blood Wolf Star. After careful investigation, they found that Immorse was the only one who was still alive among these people. Therefore they quickly reported this to the teleportation hall. As long as Immorse teleported back, they would contact Immorse immediately and charge him a high fee. At this moment more and more vampires and werewolves had gathered around Immorse, unaware of what had happened. Immorse didn't summon the Azure Dragon avatar and didn't use any energy. No matter how violent he was, he could only kill 4 or 5 people with one punch at most. It was far less visually impactful than killing dozens of spiritualists in an instant. Therefore those vampires and werewolves thought that no matter how strong this guy was, he would run out of energy one day. They had millions of werewolves and vampires, and with their advantage in numbers, they would eventually kill this kid. However, in fact, Immorse kept drinking the Titan dragon blood, and his body was constantly being modified by it. Therefore, the power he possessed was far beyond the imagination of these werewolves and vampires. It was no exaggeration to say that Immorse could kill forever if he wanted to. Finally, with the passage of time, the sun set and the moon rose. The moon set again and the sun rose again. According to the Flame Origin Continent's time, Immorse had been here for 4 months and 5 days. At this moment, Immorse had gone completely berserk. His entire body was shrouded in killing intent. His eyes were so red that they looked like they could bleed. The blood wings on his back were so red that they looked like they could drip blood. Even the werewolves and vampires felt fear just by looking at Immorse. They had surrounded this guy for 2 nights and 1 day, but this guy didn't seem to be exhausted at all. He didn't look like a human at all, nor did he look like a vampire, nor did he look like a werewolf. Instead, he was a demon. A demon that only knew how to kill. The werewolves and vampires had exhausted almost all of their methods. But he couldn't kill this kid at all. This kid was like an undying demon god. After fighting for so long, the vampires and werewolves were already thinking of retreating. However, at this moment they were in a difficult position. Did they think they could stop fighting just because they wanted to? Would this guy let them go? Moreover, they had already paid such a huge price and lost so many of their compatriots. If they gave up now, wouldn't their compatriots have died in vain? Therefore, they could only continue to besiege him. At the same time, they were constantly thinking of a way. At the same time, Immorse was constantly killing and devouring the dragon's blood. His body had already touched that limit. And it was different from before. In the past, Immorse would stagnate when he reached the limit of level 10. He needed an opportunity to evolve. But this time, when Immorse touched this limit, his body began to heat up. And it was even hotter than before. He was going to evolve directly. There was no need for an opportunity at all. In other words, his current frenzied slaughter was an opportunity for him to evolve. However, even so, he still didn't stop killing. Because at this moment there was only one thought in his mind. Kill. His body was extremely hot, but he didn't care. His blood was as hot as magma, but he didn't care. He only wanted to kill. After another 20 hours, at a certain moment, his body suddenly changed. The surface of his body began to be covered with a layer of black scales. His legs and arms turned into thick and powerful claws. On his body, on his back, the pair of blood dragon wings began to turn from red to black. However, they slowly condensed from illusory into substance. They formed a pair of black, wide wings. On the wings, a pair of extremely sharp claws shone with a chilling light under the sunlight. His head had changed as well. His face was also covered with black scales. Sharp thorns grew out of his head. He no longer looked like a human but the head of a monster. A pair of eyes were as red as blood. Behind him, a tail full of sharp thorns grew out. As the shape of his entire body changed, his body was also changing. His body began to rapidly grow larger and longer. 10 meters, 20 meters, 40 meters, 60 meters. Finally, it stopped at 100 meters. At this moment, he had already transformed into a 100-meter-long dragon. Finally, Immorse had evolved into a giant dragon. At the same time, a system prompt appeared in his mind: frowny face, evolution successful. The system's voice finally made Immorse, who had been unconscious for a long time, regain some rationality. For the first time in more than 3 months, he communicated with the system in his mind. Check level. Name: Immorse. Race: human, bloodthirsty demon dragon. Level: Level 1 bloodthirsty demon dragon. Level 1 desolate hunter. Level 7 long Xianxia. Evolution path: ancient demon dragon. When Immorse saw this, he frowned. His consciousness also became a little clearer. Didn't you say that I was going to evolve into a titan dragon? The system's voice replied, frowny face. During the evolution process, due to the host's continuous killing, his body was surrounded by killing intent, and his body mutated, so he evolved into a bloodthirsty demon dragon. What's the difference between a bloodthirsty demon dragon and a titan dragon? The dragon race is also divided into levels. A titan dragon is the lowest level existence among the dragon race. A bloodthirsty demon dragon is more than 1 level stronger than a titan dragon. Especially in terms of combat power, it is infinitely close to the war dragon race, which was born for battle. And it is easier for a bloodthirsty demon dragon to level up. As long as it keeps killing, it can increase its level and combat power. Immorse frowned slightly. Do I have to walk the path of bloodthirsty killing? Chapter 403. The system continued to explain to Immerse. The advantage of the bloodthirsty demon dragon is its strong combat power and easy evolution. However, the downside was also obvious. Once he became a bloodthirsty demon dragon, he would have to kill continuously to level up. It was also because of this that the bloodthirsty demon dragon became the enemy of the entire dragon clan tens of thousands of years ago. The moment the dragon race discovers the bloodthirsty demon dragon, they will do their best to kill it. That's why, unless absolutely necessary, it's best not to reveal your bloodthirsty demon dragon form in front of the dragons. When Immerse heard this, he was filled with stubbornness. If that was the case, so what if he became the enemy of the entire dragon clan? If it was in the past, Immerse would have thought to lay low for a while and develop. No one would dare to do anything to him after he was fully developed. But now, perhaps due to the continuous killings in the past few months, his state of mind was affected. Therefore, his idea was to kill whoever dared to provoke him. So what if he was from the dragon race? At this moment, the expressions of the surrounding vampires and werewolves changed drastically when they saw Immerse transform into such a gigantic dragon. Although this giant dragon was not as large as the 1,000-meter-long monster that had appeared before, it was still very powerful. However, this dragon was brimming with murderous intent. A pair of blood-red eyes released a chilling murderous intent. It seemed that it was only interested in one thing: killing. These vampires and werewolves were barely able to muster enough energy to fight against the 1,000-meter-long monster. But in the face of this terrifying dragon, they didn't have the slightest intention to fight. Their only thought was to escape. Immerse spread his wings and roared into the sky. A dragon roar filled with killing intent came from his mouth. Oh, roar! With a long howl, all the beasts were frightened. Within a radius of 100 kilometers, all living beings were trembling in fear. Immerse stomped on the ground with his hind claws. The ground beneath his feet instantly cracked. With a flap of his wings, he leaped into the air. A pair of giant wings that were nearly 100 meters wide spread out. The pair of giant wings were not in perfect condition. Instead, there were holes of various sizes on them. This was the symbol of the bloodthirsty demon dragon. Ordinary dragons had strong self-healing abilities, so after their wings were injured, they would recover very quickly. However, due to the bloodthirsty demon dragon's excessive thirst for blood, certain aspects of their bodies were lacking. As a result, their wings were usually tattered and tattered. It was like a tattered bedsheet. However, this did not affect their ability to fly at all. Immerse soared 10,000 meters into the sky. It made a circle in the sky, flying up and down, left and right. He was getting used to his body and his wings. When the bloodthirsty demon dragon was flying, it had two forms. One was in the normal state where he could reach a speed of more than 300 meters per second. The other was to use energy to assist flight, which could reach up to 10,000 meters per second. Immerse tried to switch between the two states, constantly changing his flying posture in the sky. Perhaps it was because the advancement of this major realm was different from what the system had planned. It was equivalent to not completing the mission given by the system, so there was no system reward. However, this body alone was much better than any other reward. On the ground, all the vampires and werewolves who were still trembling just now took advantage of the fact that this giant dragon was not paying attention to them and hurriedly fled in all directions. After Immerse adapted to this body, he turned around and dived toward the ground. There were over 1 million vampires and werewolves gathered on the ground before. Now it was not so easy for them to escape in a short period of time. Immerse's flying speed in his normal state was 300 meters per second. However, when he dived, he was already infinitely close to the speed of sound. How could the werewolves and vampires on the ground escape? Immerse swooped down as if covering the sky and the sun. His two hind claws scratched the ground. Dozens of vampires and werewolves were instantly clawed into meat paste by his claws. Screams of terror rang out in the surroundings. Then Immerse flapped his wings again. In their panic, the vampires quickly spread their demon wings and fled in all directions. Immerse let out a dragon roar and opened his cave-like mouth. Boom! The scorching red flame dragon's breath shot out. Suddenly, a large area of the sky seemed to be reflected in a fiery red color. Within a radius of 1,000 meters, All the vampires who were fleeing were swallowed by the sea of fire. Then they screamed and fell from the sky. After they landed, they kept rolling in the fire, trying to extinguish the flames on their bodies. However, the red flame dragon's breath was not an ordinary flame. Not to mention rolling, even if you poured water on it, it would not be able to extinguish it in a short period of time. As a result, hundreds of vampires died just like that amidst the screams. At the same time, a number appeared in Immerse's mind: frowny face kill points. 1100. It seemed that killing these level 10 werewolves and level 10 evolved vampires did not bring him many kill points. Immerse dived a few more times and the red flame dragon's breath continued to shoot out. The area within a radius of dozens of square kilometers became a sea of fire. In this sea of fire, screams and cries could be heard continuously. In the end, apart from a few vampires and werewolves who managed to escape, the 1 million vampires and werewolves here were all exterminated by Immerse. A first-grade bloodthirsty demon dragon's combat power was probably comparable to a level 1 Grand Desolate Master. Most importantly, when the bloodthirsty demon dragon released its dragon's might, the low-level creatures below didn't even have the thought of running away. They could only watch as this terrifying dragon descended from the sky. However, even though he was constantly killing, Immerse did not only have the thought of killing in his mind like before. His mind was still very clear. He constantly reminded himself that he could not fall into the same state as before. This was also a unique characteristic of the bloodthirsty demon dragon. Bloodthirsty demon dragons seem to only know how to kill, but their minds were always clear. In this way, Immerse would no longer be on the verge of going insane like before. In the end, after exterminating these 1 million vampires and werewolves, Immerse's kill points finally reached 100. He had also successfully advanced to a second-grade bloodthirsty demon dragon. At the same time, he discovered that his hunting level had also risen to a level 2 Desolate Master. Immerse couldn't help but feel a little happy. It seemed that the bloodthirsty demon dragon's level was related to the Desolate Master. When the bloodthirsty demon dragon leveled up, the Desolate Master's level would also increase. However, he did not know whether the bloodthirsty demon dragon's level would also increase if the Desolate Master's level increased. However, now that he had advanced to level 2, killing these vampires and werewolves would not give him many kill points. Moreover, if Immerse remembered correctly, it was almost time to go to the Ancient Dragon battlefield. There were no other restrictions on going to the Ancient Dragon battlefield apart from being a level 1 Desolate Master. However, the Ancient Dragon battlefield had a low tide every 10 years. It was safest to go during the low tide. Although Immerse had now advanced to a bloodthirsty demon dragon, he had never been to the Ancient Dragon battlefield and did not know much about it. Therefore, it was better to go during the low tide. Chapter 404. After Immerse became a bloodthirsty demon dragon, one of his skills had also been upgraded. The Blood Dragon's Eye had been upgraded to the Demon Dragon's Eye. In addition to all the previous abilities of the Blood Dragon's Eye, the Demon Dragon's Eye also had another ability, a special deterrent to infected creatures. When Immerse activated the Blood Dragon's Eye, the werewolves and blood breeds would not dare to move as long as he glanced at them. They would also obey Immerse's orders. This was the new ability of the Blood Demon's Eye. Next, Immerse's body quickly shrank with a thought. The scales, giant wings, long tail and sharp claws on his body all disappeared. He returned to his human form. However, when he transformed into his dragon form, the clothes on his body were torn apart and he was now naked. Fortunately, there was no one around. He had to take out another set of clothes from the miniature world and put it on. At the same time, he sighed in his heart. Transforming into a dragon was powerful, but it was a bit of a waste of clothes. Then he went to the coordinates. Half an hour later, he had returned to the teleportation hall of the 10th hunting island. As soon as he appeared, 2 hunters from hunting island number 10 said to Immerse, "Brother Immerse, you're the leader of this hunting island." "Sir, according to the rules, each ticket can only stay on the 10th hunting island for 2 months. You've stayed on the 10th hunting island for 5 months and 3 days. If you exceed 2 months, you'll have to pay 10 times the amount. If you exceed 63 days, you'll have to pay 80,000 per day. After deducting the change, you'll have to pay 5 million. After Immerse became a bloodthirsty demon dragon, His vision had broadened a lot. His vision had far exceeded the flaming beginning continent. He was going to become an immemorial demon dragon in the future. Naturally, he would not care about such a small amount of money. Although the 10th hunting island was a bit too shady, they had already told him about it before going to the Blood Wolf Star, so it was not too bad. Most importantly, Immorse did not lack money. He nodded. I'll pay now. The two hunters were stunned and looked at Immorse carefully. They thought that they would scare this guy when they said 5 million. They did not expect this guy to be so straightforward. It seemed that he was another rich young master. Thinking of this, a smile appeared on their faces. He hurriedly gestured towards Immorse. Young master, this way please. One of them took Immorse to pay the bill while the other went to get the manager. In the face of such a rich young master, he had to inform the manager. Soon the manager also walked over quickly. With a face full of smiles, he said, Young master, I am the manager of the 10th hunting ground. My surname is Ma. You can call me Xiao Ma. I'm sorry, but we have rules on Hunting Island 10 and we have to follow them. But we're all humans and we have to be humane. Therefore I can give you a 20% discount. Just give me 4 million. Immorse did not stand on ceremony and paid 4 million yuan directly. Then he walked away with a smile on the manager's face. This was the benefit of being rich. If he didn't have the money, Immorse would probably have forced him to leave. With Immorse's strength, no one would be able to stop him if he wanted to leave. However, there would be a lot of trouble. Now that he paid directly, not only would it save him a lot of trouble, but this guy would also have to flatter him with a face full of smiles. Although Immorse did not think that his words were true, everyone liked to hear good words. After all, it was good to be in a good mood. After leaving Hunting Island 10, Immorse returned to Hunting Island 1. Only then did he take Emma and her son out of Microworld. When the people on Hunting Island 1 saw Immorse, they could not help but feel a little surprised. Because at this moment, Immorse seemed to have the faint domineering aura of a king. When they saw Immorse, they could not help but have the urge to worship him. Happy also came out to welcome him. For the past 5 months she had been missing Immorse all the time. She missed him so much that she could not eat or sleep. She seemed to have lost a lot of weight. When she saw Immorse, she no longer cared about being reserved. She quickly stepped forward and threw herself into Immorse's arms. Leaning against Immorse's broad and warm chest, she could no longer hold back the tears in her eyes. They flowed down her cheeks and wet the clothes on Immorse's chest. She hugged Immorse tightly as if she was afraid that Immorse would leave again. Immorse also hugged Happy tightly. This time he had been very busy during the 5 months he was away. However, as long as he was free, Happy's figure and her smile would appear in his mind uncontrollably. Moreover, if he had Happy by his side, he would not have fallen into the endless slaughter so easily. When he felt Happy's heartbeat, he finally spoke. From now on, I'll take you wherever Brother Immo goes. When Happy heard that, tears blurred her eyes once again. She nodded heavily. When the people around them saw that, they quietly dispersed. They left the time for Immorse and Happy. There was no specific time for the opening of the ancient dragon battlefield, only a general area. Therefore Immorse did not need to be too anxious. He stayed on Hunting Island number 1 for a while longer. After evolving into a bloodthirsty demon dragon, he could completely control his state of mind and would not go berserk again. However, after 5 months of continuous slaughter, he needed some time to calm down. Otherwise, it would not be a good thing if his murderous aura was too strong. It might even endanger the people around him. Therefore, he stayed on Hunting Island number 1 for a whole month. During this month, he did not think or do anything. Every day he just accompanied Happy, watched the sunrise and sunset, listened to the wind and listened to the sound of the sea. In such peaceful days, Immorse's state of mind gradually calmed down. The murderous aura in his body also lessened by a lot. At the same time, the Heavenly Gold Sect, which was ranked first in the 16 prefectures of Serene Cloud. The Great Elder's most talented disciple had been on Hunting Island number 10 for 5 months. In fact, in the 3rd month, they had already sent people to the Blood Wolf Star to cause chaos. The blood breeds and the werewolves were fighting. They thought that the disciple might have died in the war between the werewolves and the blood breeds. No one could be blamed for this. Therefore the matter came to an end. However, there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. There was a rich young master who stayed on Hunting Island number 10 for 5 months. After he returned, the news that he had paid a few million slowly spread. At the same time, Immorse planned to go to the ancient dragon battlefield after staying on Hunting Island No. 1 for a month. To go to the ancient dragon battlefield, a wormhole teleportation device was required. Immorse had already obtained this teleportation device a long time ago. Right now he only needed to activate it. Of course this time he brought Happy with him. The two of them turned into bluish-white balls of light and disappeared from Hunting Island No. 1. When they reappeared, the scene in front of them had changed. There was an undulating mountain range here. Immorse used Dragon's Will to investigate. Within a radius of more than 300 kilometers, there were mountains of all sizes. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.